Hi guys, and welcome to a patch 269/season 21 build guide for the Crusader class featuring the dual Heaven's Fury shotgun build. So this build has been around since the release of the Aegis of Valor set, but it did not gain widespread popularity or adoption until sometime in patch 268, and that's when everybody started using the build. It appeared on the leaderboards everywhere, right? And people were crushing G-Rift tiers, records, and the domination of the Crusader class continued. And so with season 20, in conjunction with the seasonal theme, you saw that people were wearing three legendary shields effectively. And so one of these shields was the Akarat's Awakening. And what this allowed people to do was to run high cooldown skills with high uptime. And so if you had a right rift, the RNG was good. You had perma AC and perma Iron Skin, for instance. And so very powerful build. It was unique to season 20 only, and so unfortunately that build is gone. But we have the next best thing, right? And while the Shield of Fury was nerfed in the current patch, rest assured it's still very powerful to build. It's still powerful, tough, engaging, and it's fun to play, in my opinion. And so the shield lost 10 stacks from the legendary power. It's a huge damage loss, but because of how good the build is, it's not too bad. Alright, so without further ado, let's just get right into the build. So starting with the gear, of course you want to have the Aegis of Valor set equipped. So just going over the set bonuses, the 2 set bonus gives you 300% increased damage to Heaven's Fury. That's the 4 times damage multiplier. It's huge, right? The 4 set bonus, it gives you resource and it gives you DR. The 6 set bonus gives you 20% or 20,000% damage to Heaven's Fury. So 201 times damage multiplier on that one. Wow, right? And so it's kind of rare for sets to have 2 bonuses to damage, and so that's one of the reasons why this build is so powerful. All right, so another set that you want to have is the Captain's set, and the 2-piece set bonus gives you CDR and RCR, while the 3 set bonus gives you damage and toughness in conjunction with CDR and RCR. And so most people are familiar with this, so I won't belabor it. The Endless Walk set, so that is the Traveler's Pledge amulet and the Compass Rose ring. So most people are familiar with this ring, so I won't cover it too much, but that's more damage and more toughness. So if you haven't noticed yet, the trend is damage and toughness. So that's what makes this build shine. Okay, so moving on from the sets, for the Bracer slot, you want the Bracer of Fury. 400% damage, increased damage to CC'd enemies. So that's the 5 times damage multiplier, huge. This is mandatory. For the other ring slot, you want the Justice Lantern. This is another mandatory item. It gives you block chance, very rare on rings, and the legendary power gives you DR in conjunction with your block chance. And so this means that you're proccing your Ivory Tower much more frequently, and it's improving your survivability. Alright, so for the shield slot, it's up to you which one you want to equip. So you can have either the Shield of Fury equipped or the Ivory Tower. So which one is the better of the two that you have available? And so it's really up to you. You just cube the other one. And for the weapon, of course, you want to have the Fate of the Fell. Okay, 500% increased damage of Heaven's Fury means this is a 6 times damage multiplier. Another huge, significant source of damage. Alright, so in terms of the cube powers, I already talked about the Ivory Tower. Aquila Cuirass. You'll want this for DR. Alternatively, you can use Stone Gauntlets, but unless you have a high AC uptime, um, I don't really recommend it because of the negative effects. So Aquila Cuirass is, I would say, best in slot. And of course, the Royal Ring of Grandeur, which allows you to equip the Aegis Valor and Captain Scent in simultaneously. So that's pretty much it for the gear. This is the standard setup. There are many variations to it. I'll go over that a little bit later, but let's just get the basics out of the way. And so in terms of ideal affixes and rolls, you'll want to, in the helmet slot, you'll want to have strength, vitality, critical hit chance for your primaries. And your secondary, you probably want a resist of some kind and a pickup radius. And so uh, the secondaries will mostly apply to the rest of your gear, right? So wherever you can get secondary resists and pickup radius, I recommend that you don't prioritize, but it's just really nice to have. And so, for instance, pickup radius, I have 9, right? And it's very useful in rifts. It will indirectly increase your times in G rifts, and so at minimum, I would say you want a total of 4 or so, but that's pretty low. All right. So, anyways, back to the gear. So the helmet I already talked about. I guess you can roll off vitality uh, for all resist, but you're giving up a lot. So unless you have a lot of Paragon, I suggest just sticking to vitality. For the shoulders, you don't ideally want to run strength. So I would recommend getting all resist, cooldown reduction, resource cost reduction, and Heaven's Fury damage in the primary slots if you can. So I've been playing this build for a while, and even I don't have an ideal shoulder. So just use whatever you can, but just keep gambling away, you know. For the glove slot, you have options here. At minimum, you'll want main stat, double crit, and cooldown reduction. Bare minimum. So alternatively, instead of main stat, you can also run attack speed or resource cost reduction, and it kind of depends on what your goals are and what kind of G-Rift content you're running, and gear, of course. So, for instance, for attack speed, that would help. Let's say you reach the next breakpoint for Fist of the Heavens, and if you're running, let's say, Bane of the Stricken, this will help you stack more of the legendary power, and so that means more damage. More damage equals higher clears, faster clears, and if you're running, let's say, Gogok, uh, that just means you're able to get it up quicker. Let's say you're running Obsidian Ring of Zodiac, you're also able to proc the legendary power much more quickly. So attack speed, it's something you may want to consider. And resource cost reduction, that's just more more DR. And so I have 28% right now. Um, it would probably bump me up into the low 30s, which is not bad. All right, for the chest slot, you want to prioritize toughness. And so primaries, something like strength, damage, or decreased damage from elite attacks, Heaven's Fury damage. If you can even roll off strength, you may want to consider that. For the secondaries, these are important. You'll want ranged and melee damage reduction if you can. So these secondary affixes are they're not possible on every piece of armor, right? And so you're very limited on where you can get these. And so something like the chest, the bracer, and the shield. I'm not really sure about the maybe even the amulet slot. So just get it where you can. But chest is going to be pretty hard to gear for. So the belt and pants are pretty standard fare. You guys know how to gear for those. For the boot, just make sure you have you just roll off movement speed for something much more useful like armor or life regen. So um, you want to make up for that in Paragon, right? Make up for movement speed in Paragon. The other ring. Okay, so the Justice Lantern, double crit and cooldown reduction. Block chance is it's standard, so you don't have to worry about that. But the thing is, it comes out of range, so you'll want to get as close to 16% block chance as possible. Also, the legendary power has a range of 45 to 55, and again, you'll want to ideally have 55%. So I'm missing about 10% from the legendary power, and that's quite significant. But you know, as you gain more Paragon, it's less important. For the bracer, you'll want holy damage, strength, all resist, critical hit chance, and for the secondary, I kind of talked about it, the ranged or melee damage reduction. It's going to be hard to get, but just use whatever, right? Whatever the best one you can get. So for the shield I would recommend at least having 2 of the ideal affixes. So that would be block chance, critical hit chance, cooldown reduction, and Heaven's Fury damage. So for Ivory Tower, since it is not a Crusader shield, you can't get skills damage on it. So you might want to actually keep the strength on Ivory Tower, or run maybe something like RCR. And of course, the secondary, you'll want to get damage reduction. Okay, so I don't know if, yeah, I didn't. Amulet, double crit, socket, and some kind of damage. So that is ideal, right? I have damage range, physical damage, 105 to 210, not bad. And it's primal, and it's augmentable, so I went with it. If Alternatively, you can do what everyone else is doing and run double crit, socket, and holy. And so this is probably going to give you a little bit more damage, but you know, some oftentimes you're not going to really have a choice. Compass Rose, you'll just want to make sure you have some damage and some cooldown reduction, right? And so there's a number of ways to gear for this, right? So there's one example there. I didn't have critical hit chance on the ring I'm wearing, so you can run critical hit chance instead of the damage range. You can even slot in attack speed, depending on what your needs are. And of course, you can just roll off CDR and just go for pure raw damage. Yeah, baby. And so this would be useful if you have that much CDR. Right now I have about 62.6% effective CDR. The bare minimum I'm willing to tolerate is about 58%. So, you know, it's gonna vary from person to person, what people can tolerate. But having a good amount is important. So just experiment and see what works for you. As for the weapon you also have options here. So of course you want the damage range, 10% damage, and cooldown reduction. So I have attack speed on mine, but that is, you know, up to you. You can have strength. You know, that'll help you, let's say early on in the season or something, when you don't have much main stat. Also, you might not even need the attack speed, or you can go for something like RCR for even more DR. So it's really up to you. For the secondary affix, it's not really all that important since Wrath is not an issue, but it's nice to have. Okay, so that is the gear. Let's go over the skills. Alright, so Fist of the Heavens, Fissure Rune, it is mandatory. Looks like this. So it synergizes well with the 4-piece bonus. You'll gain Wrath back by hitting enemies with it, and you'll be able to spam it. So, you know, you may not want to spam it at every opportunity, but you know, intermittently you want to keep up, like let's say your Golgok stacks, right? Heaven's Fury Blessed Crown. So this build is called the dual Heaven's Fury because you're utilizing 2 runes of Heaven's Fury. One is equipped, the Blessed Crown rune. Looks like this. So you get 3 vertical beams and some ground effects. So this is a good source of damage. It's one of the ways, primary ways you're killing trash and then non-elites. The other rune for Heaven's Fury is of course covered by the Ivory Tower. Okay, so the next skill that you need is Judgment Debilitate. Looks like that. So what's nice about Debilitate is that it gives you DR for those affected by the skill, which is really nice. And more importantly, this will proc your legendary power on the Bracer of Fury. And so be careful not to spam Judgment too often, because let's say you're pushing and you keep spamming it, eventually you're going to CC immune a mob or enemies. So when that happens, your Bracer of Fury is ineffective. So just keep that in mind. Also applies to Juggernaut elites and some RGs, which I'll kind of talk about later. Iron Skin. Iron Skin, you have options here. So Steel Skin and Flash. So these two, depending on what your needs are. So Steel Skin is useful for running speeds. You'll increase the duration of the skill. And so let's say you're in a rift and you're fighting Goatmen, Lickers, and Succubi. Man, they can wreck you in an instant. So having the extra uptime on Iron Skin may save you, right? Help you get off that floor or whatever. But if you are pushing, you will definitely want Iron Skin Flash. This has the benefit of the illusory boots, if you're familiar with that. So basically, it will allow you to just move through things besides the environment. And so, let's say you're walled in and you're standing on an arcane pivot. Well, just pop the skill and you can just move out of the way. So this, again, this is you need this for pushing, but for speeds, it's really up to you. Akarat's Champion Prophet. This is a staple for any Crusader build. You're gonna need it, and it just gives you damage and DR, just like a lot of the other. It synergizes really well with the gear. Okay, so I run Steed Charge for speed farming. Steed Charge Endurance. It's up to you if you want to use it, but make sure that you have some kind of movement skill. If you don't want to opt for Steed Charge. So if you don't have this, just make sure you have Flash. So the nice thing about this is that it's a mobility skill, right? And you'll want it if you want to improve your speed drift times. Of course, when you're pushing, you don't want this skill, right? And so you'll want to slot in either Provoke Hit Me. This will increase your block chance. So this is a boost to your DR and toughness. Or you can go for Laws of Valor, Unstoppable Force, which will give you RCR, and it's a huge boost to your DR. And so, like I said, I have 28% RCR. If I have that skill equipped, the law it'll boost me to 64%. And so, quite useful for pushing. Okay, in terms of passives, Heavenly Strength, that is mandatory. Hold Your Ground is mandatory. These two are optional. Finery, I would say it's semi-mandatory. Like, there's really no reason to not run Finery, okay? So it boosts your strength, which indirectly increases your damage and toughness, right? Holy Cause, it increases. I run Holy Cause, but this is optional. This is totally optional. It's a damage boost, and you gain some sustain from your attacks. But you can also run, let's say, Long Arm of the Law if you're pushing for more for increasing the duration of your law, or you can run Indestructible, your cheat death passive. This uh, indispensable for for hardcore players. Don't leave home without it. Alright, so those are the skills. It's going to change depending on what you're doing, so just keep that in mind. Paragon. Pretty easy. So looking at the offensive, defensive, and utility tabs, you just want to max those. No brainer. In terms of the core tab, starting with Wrath, the bottom, it's not really necessary to put any points into this, and so like even if you did, you might get, it might help you a little bit, but let's say your aim is bad or you're fighting RG that doesn't replenish your wrath pool when you hit with Fist of the Heavens. So let's say this waypoint is RG. Normally you would attack the RG directly, but sometimes you don't want to do that because it'll just deplete your wrath pool even though you're hitting them, right? And so when you fight RGs like that, you might want to attack around them, and that way these little electricity bolts, when they hit, they'll give you some wrath back. So you're gonna have wrath issues when you fight those kinds of RGs, but that will help. But even if you max this out, I don't know if it's really going to benefit you against those RGs. So I would recommend against it. Movement speed, you just want 25% between Paragon and your gear. So pretty simple. Vitality, just make sure you have a pretty good supply. I like to have at least 700,000 life, so all the DR in the world isn't going to save you when your health pool is low. So just have enough where you're comfortable, right? So you might want less or more. It's really up to you. But I find that 700,000 is a bare minimum that I can tolerate, because things can go south pretty quick, right? All right, and then strength. As for strength, you just pump the rest into it, and so pretty simple. All right, so one thing about the follower, it is completely optional. So the whole point of this build is to get hit, right? You want to proc your Ivory Tower legendary power, and that means you have to get hit. And so having a follower sometimes impedes that goal. And so it's really up to you if you want to run this this companion. But if you do run the follower, there's a whole bunch of benefits, right? So you can use the Oculus Ring, for example. When you kill enemies, you get a ring on the ground, you stand in it, and then you can get a damage boost of up to 85%, a 1.85 times damage multiplier, pretty huge, significant. Or if you decide to run Unity, because let's say you're low Paragon and you're kind of squishy, you're gonna need Unity depending on what you're doing. And so I'll kind of get into that later, but you'll need a follower if you're running Unity, right? So in terms of the Templar, right? Templar has some skills that contribute to CC immunity of enemies. So, like for instance, charge stuns enemies. You don't want your Templar stunning enemies when you're pushing, right? When you're running speeds, it doesn't really matter, but if you CC immune enemies, well, you're not getting the benefit of from your Bracer of Fury. So just keep that in mind. So for the Templar, I would recommend heal, loyalty. These will give you some sustain. Onslaught is, I don't know, it's useless, but whatever. And you can use Inspire for some Wrath regen, right? So kind of important. If your aim is bad, maybe it'll help you in that regard. Alternatively, you can also use the Enchantress. So the Enchantress has some useful abilities, right? So Missile Ward, it gives you DR for ranged attacks. So it's kind of like, the secondary from my chest, right? It's pretty nice, okay? And it can also increase your attack speed, so maybe this will put you over on your Fist of the Heavens breakpoint. And by the way, I've looked for a chart for a breakpoint chart for Fist of the Heavens, but I could not find one. So you'll have to test for yourself um, how much attack speed you really need, and it shouldn't take too long. Of course, you want to, if you're running Stricken or not Stricken, Gogok, you'll want to make sure it's maxed out at 15 stacks. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, if this puts you over the breakpoint, it's really nice. If you want to stack, let's say, more stricken, you want to accumulate more stricken stacks, or if you want to lower the um, cooldown reductions, right, from your Obsidian Ring legendary power, so you'll be proccing that much more quickly. And so yeah, it's really up to you which follower you want to use, but I usually run with a follower. I like them. Um, I don't really leave home without it. Okay, and so yeah, that's it with follower. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that this build has variance, right, in terms of some of the skills and, well, gear in particular. So um, so far I've talked about the standard build, right, and so that's kind of what you see, what I've covered. Alternatively, you can run another standard build that people use, and it's focused on the rings or the jewelry slots, right? And so people run the Flavor of Time for double pylons, right? If you get 5 pylons in a rift, that's like getting 10. That's huge. It's a game changer, and so you get the benefit of that, and you can also run the Ring of the Zodiac, and so double pylons and high uptime on your skills, your cooldown skills. So something to consider. So there's a hybrid also. So you can combine the best of both worlds, I guess. So you run the Endless Walk set. You wear the Rorg. Rorg is mandatory for this build. You may not need Justice Lantern, but you need Rorg for the sets. And so the hybrid build, you'll want to wear Rorg and then cube Zodiac Ring. Or if you don't want to use Zodiac, you don't care about high uptime on AC, you can benefit from both Endless Walk set and the Flavor of Time. And so just one thing to note is that because you don't have Justice Lantern equipped, you're going to be quite squishy. So just make sure you're either really optimized, you have high Paragon, or um, yeah. So just make sure you can take the hits in the G rifts, right? Just you don't want to get wrecked, right? Having all the damage in the world isn't going to help you if you get one-shotted. And so those are the hybrid options, and then of course you have other options, right? When you're using the Endless Walk set. And so I also like to run the Stone of Jordan. So this is very pertinent to patch 269, right? So the one I usually equip, it's an older version of the Stoner Jordan, but the new one has a new legendary power. Okay, and so one of the benefits of the SOJ is, let's say, for example, I have a Bracer of Fury, and it doesn't have holy damage. Well, let's just pretend this Stoner Jordan has lightning damage, right? And so I can equip these instead of, or I can equip this Bracer of Fury instead of my Primal, because I can get a little bit more toughness out of this one. And so I lose a little bit of damage, but I gain a lot of toughness, right? And so I can roll off Vitality for all resist, for instance. Anyways, so yeah, SOJ is underrated. It does have limited use, but if it fits your needs, you might want to save your SOJs. Don't reforge them, right? Don't waste your bounty mats on these. But if you do find one, save it, and there might be a use for it. Excuse me. All right, so other options include the Unity. So you can also slot in Unity for extra toughness, like I mentioned earlier. Also, if you're running two-man, for instance, you can slot in the Oculus Ring. So let's say your partner doesn't have it because he's not Z DPS. Let's say you're running with a Witch Doctor, and they're a trash killer, and they may not have this ring. So what's nice about the Oculus Ring is that it will benefit the whole party. You can also use the convention, of course, and for speeds, I don't know about how useful it is. It's kind of hit and miss. But for pushing, if you got like 8K Paragon or something like that, and you can slot this in, go for it, man. You know. All right, so I'm not sure if I covered the legendary gems, but yeah, that's probably something I forgot. So esoteric is mandatory. You'll want to max this at 100. So until your Paragon, let's say 7K, you're gonna probably need this for pushing, right? If you're doing speeds, uh, like 4 or 5K, it might work for you. It kind of depends on how optimized you are in terms of toughness. Bane of the Trapped, it's practically always on. You don't really have to worry about it. It's just set it and forget it. So very important to have. It boosts your damage tremendously. And if you're running speeds, you'll want Gogok, but if you are pushing, you will definitely want Bane of the Stricken. So you'll want to sacrifice the Gogok for Stricken if you're pushing. Don't sacrifice these two. But hey, if that works for you somehow, whatever. But typically, you'll want to replace your Gogok with Stricken. Okay, so in terms of playstyle, let me kind of just quickly touch on that. So when you first enter a rift, you want to get enough stacks from your force-up bonus to survive, right? And so the worst thing that can happen is you enter a rift and you just die instantaneously. And so in order to prevent that, you just kind of attack whatever enemies are there. Then you'll get some stacks, and as a benefit, you'll also get some Golgok stacks if you're using Golgok, or you're proccing your legendary power from Obsidian Ring. So yeah, once you enter a rift, just make sure you're attacking mobs, and if they're large enough, make sure you kill them. Remember, trash is a significant source of G-rift progression, so non-elites, right? And if it's the paltry size, just move on, right? So just when you're moving from mob to mob, just make sure you're intermittently hitting enemies with Fist of the Heavens. That way you'll keep up your Gogok stacks and your 2-piece bonus. 2-piece and 4-piece. And so one thing to note is that you want to be able to kill things outside of Akarat's champion. So don't just spam AC. This is like your when you're fighting elites, you want to activate this, or when you're about to die, right? And so this gives you a free cheat death, and so you want to use this strategically, unless you're running the Ring of the Zodiac. Then it doesn't really matter, right? Just spam it whenever it's available. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And so what I do is, let's say there's a sizable mob, right? So you want to cast Heaven's Fury. Just wait a little bit for these stacks to accumulate, and then cast Judgment. And so you'll notice that these are on cooldown, right? And so you want to be strategic about your casts, right? So you might want to kite, gather mobs, and so just use it wisely, right? In terms of the pylons in G-Rifts, so you want to be careful about some of them. The first one that I can think of that comes to mind is Shield. Shield you generally want, but if you're running Iron Skin Flash, the thing is, the rune activates when you take damage, and so you're not going to get increased move speed if you're not getting hurt. And so if you don't need the shield pylon, don't get it, right? Another one to watch out for, to really think about, is speed. So speed can help you or hurt you. Let's say you enter a bad floor, right? So like sewers. Sewers you just want to get the heck off of. So if you see a pylon at the beginning of the sewer rift, just get it and get off the floor, right? But the problem is that speed generally can lead to CC immunity of enemies. And so like I talked about earlier, if you're casting Judgment too much, you're going to negate the effect of the Bracer of Fury's legendary power eventually. And so you definitely want to think about getting speed or not. It's just you want to think about it. Don't think too hard though. So power, conduit, let's see, I'm missing one. Anyways, the rest of the pylons you don't really have to worry about too much. Just the two that I talked about. And in terms of the RG, some RGs aren't affected by the Judgment Immobilize. And so, again, you're not going to be able to, no matter what you do, get the Bracer of Fury to proc. And so, like, let's say you're fighting the Butcher and you judge him. Well, his life bar is not going to move, right? And so there's quite a number of RGs that aren't affected by Immobilize from Judgment. So just keep that in mind. It's weird. So Shield Glare works against those enemies, those RGs, right? Shield Glare will proc the Bracer, but Judgment will not at times. So something to consider, especially when you're pushing, right? You fight that that RG after just slogging through, and you just have enough time to beat the RG and clear the rift, but your bracers don't work, and so good game, man. It's time to end it. All right, so that G rift is a waste. So I think that's about it. Let me load a video for you guys. Oh, one more thing. So if you're running groups, 3-man and 4-man isn't really going to utilize this build, but if you're running 2-man, you may want to consider Witch Doctor, DH, and Barb. So, uh, so Witch Doctor last season, season 20, I was running with, we were doing uh, speed 115s at about 5 minutes at Paragon 2200. Unfortunately, both our classes got nerfed, so, you know, we might not, maybe we'll do like G-Rift 112s or 113s, but Witch Doctor is still a viable option. DH, for DH, we have the ZDH, right? Or you also have the GOD DH. And so both are good depending on what you're doing, depending on if you're doing speeds or if you're pushing. If you're pushing, you want a Z character to run with you, and Z Barb is another viable choice. And also, if you're just doing speeds with Barb, you'll want a Whirlwind Ren Barb. But you know, just run with whoever, and maybe you'll find some combination that that's not typical but works. So, anyways, I have a showcase, a speed 110 I want to show you, just to give you a feel for how strong the build is in light of the nerf. So let me load that up for you. Alright, so... Alright, so just keep in mind that this is a build that utilizes the options, right? So I'm using the SOJ, squishy. It's a squishy spec. 3200 Paragon. So typically I would try to get my 4-piece AOV stacks up, but I saw door elites and I just went for it. It can get kind of dangerous, so yeah, I would advise against it. So make sure you're killing mobs. So I just got Conduit. Conduit is going to do that for me. But if you come across, and when you encounter a sizable mob, you know, I suggest killing it, unless, you know, it doesn't really give you much progress. This is especially important in Season 21, where your seasonal buff is based on the amount of kills you do, so keep that in mind. Here's a Juggernaut. Judging is not going to do anything for you, so just hold on using that skill. Sometimes, depending on if you're fighting a lone Juggernaut, you may want to skip those types of elites. So I just got channeling, and I just want to do some exploring here. And I went a little bit too far. But that's okay. It's just, with channeling, you can just get off the floor real fast. Alright, that's the end of this floor. Okay, this tile set is usually kind of mediocre, especially in this run. You have Succubi, and they will wreck you, right? So just be careful. Again, you want to pop AC for fighting elites, or when you need it in a bind. Alright, that's a power pylon. So this elite pack should have died pretty quick. I was surprised. It's not even Juggernaut, so I suspect that my block chance isn't as high as I wanted it to be. So it's around 50% for the SOJ spec, and that's kind of low, but oh well. Caves. Just get off them as quickly as possible. They're like sewers. You know, it's hard to get a good floor, and so you're not going to get much progression. So wretched mothers, you want to judge them as soon as possible so they don't disperse. Typically you want to wait before you cast Judgment to stack your Shield of Fury legendary power. Alright, so I'm probably wasting some time here killing these monster types. I don't think they give much progression. Oh well. So where is that exit? There it is. Alright. Oh, okay. Alright. So this tile set is usually good, right? Got good mob density, plenty of pylons. Only drawback is that there's a lot of doors. So just spend your time here. So if I didn't notice the elite pack up top, and that's going to cost me quite a bit of time. And so I mean it happens. I'm just trying to find out where this elite pack came from, where the rest of them are. So in these kinds of situations, you may want to just move on. Alright, so kind of like what I talked about earlier with the speed pylon, you definitely want to think about it near the end of this rift, and so I don't need it. Alright, I just need a sliver of progression here. RG is coming up, and my AC uptime is running out. Let's make quick work of this RG. So that's about 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Not bad, considering the mistakes I made and how mediocre the rift was. So expect to run anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes. Alright, so that's about it. Yeah, this video is quite a bit longer than I wished it to be, and I just hope that this guide was helpful to somebody. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.